Yes, yes, yes. Shalom, Chabarim, shalom. So here we're at the 39th degree of our sabbatical, Rastafari sabbatical study. So here we're in the fourth book of Moshe, fourth book of Moses, known as Bamidbar. In the Hebrew, we call it, Judaically, we call it Bamidbar, like in the wilderness. The English KJV translation from the Septuagint LXX comes down to the book of Numbers. Now, the book of Numbers, it's a very interesting book, very, very interesting. One, for those into sacred geometry, the pi and the phi. Also remind I to do a video about the pi and the phi, like in Hebrew. If we say pi or p, is like my mouth or fee, right? The peh or the fe. The peh, fe, in other words, the mouth can be pointed in two different ways, as a peh and a fe, almost like they do with English, like you have the, like pi and the phi. You ever look at that? Pi, P-I, right? And then you have phi, P-H-I, pi and phi, the sacred geometrical numbers. So there's a lot of sacred geometry in the fourth book, or that can be discerned or can be interpreted or even read in the scripture. You can see these numbers there, and a lot of speculation about what these sacred geometrical numbers, how fast they say light, the speed of light. The tribe of Judah moves at the speed of light based on the numbers there. You also have the numbers concerning, what they say is the shape of the earth, the pyramid, the number for the pyramids. All this is said to be found in some of these things we followed up on, and quite interestingly enough, some very interesting numbers are found in the book of Numbers. But here, at this 39th degree of our sabbatical study, is known as Shabbat Chukat. Chukat. Now, hok, breaking it down to the root idea is hok, right? We have hok, right? Interesting, like when they say house of consciousness, hok, right? What we're talking about, like also the heck, and the ku. These are particular symbols of the rulers in ancient Mitzrayim, in ancient Kemet. You see there's a shepherd's rod, which is referred to as the hawk, right? Like the heck. Some pronounce it as heck, the heck, like they say heck shaus or hexos, heck shaus, and they say that heck or hawk, right, refers to like shepherd kings, heck, hawk, shaus, right? So we have the heck, right, in ancient Egypt, the heck in the Ryan Kemet in the language of Egypt, right, which is the shepherd's rod, and then we have the hu, K-H-U, the hu or the ku. Some say ku or the hu, which is the cow prod. So we have these two symbols. Now this brings us right to Bereshith. As ones can read into the narrative, the Hebrew narrative, we have Cain, Cain, and Abel. One appears to be like a farmer, right? And one appears to be a shepherd. One offers the grain of the earth, and the other one offers, we say the fat, the fat of the lamb, so to speak, the Abel. Now we see Abel as a Hebrew type, according to the principle of the ancient and many of the mythology, the mythos, as kind of a type of Asar. Looking at that from the Hebrew and Afro-Shemitically, like one who's bound, the bound one. But if you know the narrative from ancient Egypt, you'll get that there. But why do we have Hathor? Right? We have Hathor. One's probably looking at Hathor for a couple of minutes saying, well, what's that to do with Hathor? What has to do with this 39th degree of our sabbatical study known as Chukat, right? Chukat, right? So here, we have the ordinance, the statute. Let's see if we can bring up the scripts right here. The ordinance, the statute, right, of the red heifer. Let's do this right here and bring this out right here from the previous. Let's just put red heifer or the red cow, right? The heifer, the female cow. We call it the para, Aduma. So here we go right here. Here's where we pick up. Actually pick up with Numbers chapter 19. And Yahweh spake to Moshe and to Aharon, saying, this is the ordinance. So the ordinance is the chukah, the chukah. You see chukah, right? Chukah is a statute, ordinance, a limit, enactment, something prescribed, statute, right? And if you notice, the word chukah is a noun feminine, right? Chukah, a noun feminine, also with the T terminal at the end, chukat. We have chukat for this Shabbat, chukat. So here is the feminine of the H2706. So we have the 2708. You hit the H, we have hawk, as we mentioned, the hawk. Now the hawk is a statute, an ordinance, a limit, something prescribed. Notice prescribed means it was prescribed. Scribed, to write. It was written before. Something that's due, a prescribed task, a prescribed portion, an action prescribed for oneself or to resolve, a prescribed due, a prescribed limit, boundary, enactment, decree, ordinance, a specific decree, a law, a Torah, direction, instruction in general, enactments, statutes, in the sense of conditions, enactments, decrees, civil enactments prescribed by Elohim. But note that as a part of speech, it's a noun masculine. So that shows here in the Hebrew we have chukah, right, as we have in this Shabbat chukat, concerning the para aduma, the red heifer, right, the red heifer, the red cow. We call this, or the red Hathor, right, the red Hathor. Remember where the people just come from, right? This came out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, out of the Hikapata, right, Egypta, right, the Hetkapata. They came out of Tameri, you know, Kemet, the various names that Mitzrayim, the Mitzvah is Mitzrayim. We're going to use the Hebrew expression, and Kemet, if you please. So we have hawk, which is the masculine of the word, and chukah, which is the feminine of the word. So we have hawk and chukah, right? Now, this actually comes from this root. This is the root of the masculine hawk, as we have hawk shaus, right? Shepherd. Remember the shepherd's rod in ancient Egypt, the hek and the ku, those symbols, the shepherd's rod and the cow prod. So we have the hek, or the hawk, shepherd's rod, and we have hawk here, a statute, and the feminine form of it is chukah. And this particular ordinance or statute right here is concerning the red heifer, the para aduma. Right now, the hawk, the chukah, plural, in the plural sense, usually statutes or ordinances are referred to as chukim, just to put it in a plural sense, right? A plural sense. But getting to the root of hawk, masculine, chukah, right? Chukat, the feminine, is chakak. And this is going to really surprise some of y'all. Some of you already know this Chabarim. The Chabarim know this, but check it out right here. Notice where this word come from. It's the H2710. We have chakak. Chakak. What does it sound like in English for a moment? To hack, right? Like to engrave. What? To hack? To engrave? Chakak? Yes, the H2710 chakak. Chakak, right? Chakak or chokak, right? To cut out. BDB, Browns, Drivers, Briggs, to cut out, to decree, to inscribe, to set, to engrave. We have engravings right here, right? Talking about hieroglyphs, or is it carved in stone, right? Portray, to govern. So getting to the root of hawk, the masculine form of a statute or ordinance, and chukah, the feminine form of it, comes from the verb chakak, which means to cut out, to cut in, or on, to cut upon, to engrave, to inscribe, to trace, to mark out, to engrave, to inscribe, of a law, of a Torah, of a direction, an instruction. You know, when you hear people say, well, it's not like it was written in stone, right? It's not like it was written in stone. So that makes us think that if it was written in stone, it would have more weight, So maybe the ancients also understood that certain things that were cut in, engraved upon stone, did have weight. So here's an interesting connection with this particular Hebrew word here that we find in Torah, right? And as we build on it, ones can understand why we're going to make the connection between the Hebrew red heifer or the red Hathor, or maybe I should say the Hebrew red Hathor, aka the red heifer, the Para Aduma that we have right here. Right now, we're going to get a little bit more into Judaically how decrees, what is a decree, right? What is a decree? I think that might be one of the first questions here, right? What is a decree, right? What is the Hebrew word for ordinance or statute, and what does it mean? Chabarim. The Hebrew word for a statute or ordinance, right? That actually comes from the Hebrew word to inscribe, to enact, almost like to engrave in stone, is hok. Hok. Hok means a decree that's inscribed or was engraved. Now, Judaically, they like to say the hukim, the hoks, or the statutes, are divine fiats, like a divine let it be. Right? And they say that the hok and the chukah is like a decree or something that's engraved or inscribed without a reason. This is often how they bring that, without a reason. Well, that's what they say. We say that there is a reason, but the reason is so ancient, and perhaps they know it's so ancient. Look at the Strong's right here. Strong's definition brings out the H2710 chakak at the root of the Hebrew hok and chukah, right, for a statute and an ordinance. The primitive root properly is to hack. Say it ain't so. You mean to hack? Let's read on. It says that is to engrave. Then they give us a reference to Judges 5:14, to be a scribe. To be a scribe, simply, to be a scribe. So a scribe is one who hacks or engraves. By implication. So the implication of, so what the ancients first did, when we look at the primitive root, that means that what they most likely did in the ancient times was almost a direct word, the hack. They hacked this, they engraved this, hacked it, engraved it in stone or in wood or in something that could be lasting. The implication of all of this is to enact Torot, direction, instructions being cut. You see what it says? To enact laws, Torot, directions, instructions being cut in stone or metal tablets in primitive times. You mean like in the Kedem? The Kedem, what the Egyptians call, the Kedem is what the Hebrew, right? We say the Kedem, the first time. In Egypt, they call it the Zeptepi, right? Some enunciate it as Zeptepi, the first time, the most ancient times. We hear about the emerald tablets. How many of you heard about Thoth, Tahuti, Jehuti, and the emerald tablets? Right? Laws being cut in stone or metal tablets in primitive times. That means in prime means first, primero first, in first time, or generally now bringing it down to the way we use the words today, to prescribe. But even the word prescribe gives you a hint that something was already before scribe, was already before written. Now, after the colon and the hyphen is how the word chakak is translated elsewhere in the KJV, like appoint, chakak, appoint, decree, governor, chakak, grave, like the sense of engrave, lawgiver, a lawgiver, the link with chakak, engraving or cutting something in stone or in metal tablets, decree, governor, grave, engrave, lawgiver, to note something, like to carve it in the rock, carve it in the wood, right? To portray something, according to the pictograph, or one can say the hieroglyphs, so to speak, right? To print something and to set something. So this is now getting to the very root, right, of chakak, right? And the chakak is the verb behind hok, right? Hok right here. We have the masculine form, the H2706. And here we have the H2708, the feminine form, right? Which is chukah, right? The chukah. So what do we have here? This is the ordinance of the Torah that Yahweh, Yahweh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Baruch Hashem, the Holy One, blessed be He, blessed be His name, hath commanded, saying, speak to the Bnei Yisrael, the sons of Israel, the Bnei, right, the Bnei, the sons of Israel, the Israelites, that they bring thee a red heifer without spot, wherein is no blemish, and upon which never came yoke. Now, to put this into context right here, right, let's go to verse 3 just to sum up right here. And ye and y'all shall give her is the para aduma, is the red cow. Para is a female cow or a heifer, and aduma from the Adom, red, like the reddish brown ground, aduma, red. So cow, red, para aduma. Give her to Eleazar HaKohen, the priest, that he may bring her forth. Speaking about the red heifer, the red cow, without the camp, outside the camp, and one shall slay her before his face, shall slay her, right? Then it says, and Eleazar HaKohen shall take of her blood with his finger and sprinkle of her blood directly lifnei, before the tabernacle of the congregation, the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, seven times. And one shall burn the heifer in his sight, her skin and her flesh and her blood and her dung shall he burn, right? And the priest HaKohen shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet. Take note, shall take what? Cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet, and cast it into the midst of the burning of the para, the burning of the heifer. So here, what we have here at this point of the wilderness tried in Numbers chapter 19 is the ordinance, right? The ordinance, the Chukat of HaTorah. Now here's what's interesting. Did you know that Torah, right, as well, Torah is a noun feminine too? But you didn't know. You know, people say, oh, the Bible is sexist. Perhaps in your mistranslation and your misunderstanding of the translation, the KJV, yeah, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Christianity, yeah, they have put forward a lot of sexism because they miss the finer points of the Hebrew scripture because they don't study it in context with the Hebrew scripture. They get lost in their own translation. So Torah is feminine. And in this case here, this Chukat, the Chukat is also feminine right here. The ordinance of HaTorah. Did you know that the Torah is she? This is why the Torah is referred to in Proverbs chapter 1 verse 8, where it says, Beni, my son, my disciple, hear the instruction of thy father. Forsake not the law, the Torah of thy mother. Brings out another context when people say somebody's a mother ucker, right? The mother uckers would be like the Israelites that have turned their backs on HaTorah, turned their backs on the mother. So this right here is the ordinance, right? Let's bring this out in the Hebrew for a moment so we can just get the full. There might be some key word that we need to elaborate on. So here it says Zot. So here we're reading from this word, reading this way from right to left, right? From right to left right here, right? So here, let's go right here up to this right here. So here it says Zot Chukat, this. So even the word Zot, the first word, right? The first word we highlight. This word here is also feminine, Zot, right? You see where it says Zot? Zot means this. But Zot means this in the sense of, let's scroll down right here to the part of speech. Zot is this, right? She, feminine, Zot. So when it says Zot, we could say Zeh. Zeh would be this he, right? And Zot will be this she. So when you're looking at it in the KJV, it just says this. And ones perhaps don't even know that there's this to say this he. According to what polarity are we speaking? Or this she. So this is this she, Zot, this Chukat, this ordinance, this decree from the ancient Chakak, from that which was anciently engraved. It says, Zot Chukata HaTorah. This is the Chukat, is the ordinance, HaTorah, of the Torah. So this, she, is the ordinance, the statute, she, of HaTorah, of she, Asher, that which Siwa, he commanded Yahweh. Asher Siwa Yahweh, that which Jehovah commanded Lamor, saying, Dabir, the command, the imperative to speak. Dabir il b'nei Yisrael, speak to the sons of Israel, the Israelites, the b'nei Yisrael. We yikohu aleika, and yikohu, that they take aleika, they take for the eye, they take to the eye, like for you, para aduma. Let's highlight para aduma. So here is the two words making up the red heifer, the red Hathor, right? The red Hathor, 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 Hathir, Hatcherui, right? Para aduma, the cow, right? The heifer, red, right? Para aduma. Remember, aduma, right, come from Adama. Adama, which we call like Adam's earthly mother, the Adama, right, is the reddish brown ground. In Egyptian terms, that would be like the Kemet, that reddish brown ground, like black. But here, what's interesting about this decree, this statute, is concerning, this is one of the only places that we have in HaTorah where the color, right, where the color of the sacrifice is specifically mentioned. In other words, it had to be red, not red with a little bit of black, not red, it had to be perfectly red. So in this sabbatical study for this Shabbat Strong Chukat, Elohim first gives the law, direction, instruction of the red heifer, Hathor. This is a special whole burnt offering whose ashes, the ashes of the para aduma, the red, the Hebrew, we say red Hathor, were used to purify someone contaminated by contact with a dead body, with deaders of a dead body. The red heifer, the para aduma, had to be a perfect specimen that was completely red, that was completely aduma, right? Para aduma, tamima. Tamima means like without blemish, perfect to say. Perfect, that is perfectly red. Tamima, Asher Ain, right? Asher Ain Baha, right? Tamima, right? Here we go right here. Tamima, right? Tamim. You see Tamim? We have Tamim. Now it's Tamima because speaking of Aduma, it's speaking of she. Right, the she, right, saying that she, speaking of the red heifer, must be Tamima. Tamima, Asher, that which Ain Baha, Ain without, Baha in Ha, Mum, without any mum, any mum, any blemish, any spot. So that means for the para aduma to be acceptable, it had to be completely aduma, completely red, without blemish, right? Without any imperfection, right? In its color, in which there is no defect, right? Now, the ancient sages, right? The ancient sages, and looking at this from the ancient sages, right? The sages of HaTorah, right? What they brought out concerning the para, right? The para aduma, and speaking of without blemish, right? Ain, right? Ain Baha Mum. This is to refer to the para color, to the color of the para, right? What color would the para be, right? It must be completely red. Now this is a curious part here, because like we said, unlike other sacrifices or offerings at the Mizbeach in the Mishkan, right, the red heifer is particularly interesting. One, firstly and foremostly, it's the color. the color, right? We talk about the color of the cross, right? Even the wood is reddish brown, like a black man, woman, or child's complexion, right? You notice that between the wood, right? Also the reddish brown ground, right? And the complexion of black and brown people. And see the link right there. So here we have Nuit, right? The cow, sustained above the earth by Shu, and the support gods, or Netaru, support gods. This is according to the Egyptian or the Kemetic, the Mitzrayim mythos, that we can say was prescribed. In other words, that was engraved. Notice when we mentioned about the Chukat and the modern Judaism, they usually say that the Chok or the Chukah, it means a decree, a statute, or ordinance inscribed without reason, divine fiat. Then plural is the Chukim, and these sort of decrees are said Judaically to be obeyed from a sense of trust and loyalty, but not because, and we thought this was interesting in Judaic teachings, that not because they, quote, make sense, end quote, to us. Not because they make sense to us. Now, as we study the Para Aduma, even from the Peshat, from the narrative, this makes a lot of sense to us. In other words, it makes sense that others would say that a hawk, right, because what they leave out is the inscribing, the pre-engraving of it. Even in the Brit Chadasha, the New Testament, the Renewed Covenant, says that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egypts. Now, if you look at the previous video, we make the link and the connection with Thoth or Tehuti, right? Tehut, even in the Royal Amharic with Tehut and Moshe and Moses, where it says that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egypts, right? Of the Egypts, right? Upper and lower Egypts, and he was mighty in word and in deed. Now, why am I mentioning Thoth? Well, because from ancient Mitzrayim, Thoth's relationship with Hathor, with Chet Cheru, right? From the Egyptian Chet Cheru, right? The house of, some interpret as the house or the temple of Hathor, the temple, the house of Hor, or Horus, one would say, or Cherui, right, which is a Ethiopian term for the chosen, right, Cherui, right, and bears a lot with the Hebrew Bechor, like the firstborn, the Chor, Bechor, right. So here we have this very interesting statute here for this Shabbat Chukat concerning the red heifer, concerning the red Hathor. So when the sages interpret it without blemish, this refers to the cow's color, right? To the color of the cow. Now, as a point of reference, I'd like to make mention of the color of the cross. Now, what's interesting is Hathor, from how she has been prescribed, right? It's interesting, the color red, the connection of the Aduma, right? As we can see in Hathor's, in her simla, right, her outfit, and also in the iconography vis-a-vis Hathor, right? And also the cow horns, right? The solar orb and the cow horns, as one can see it pictured even right here, right? So we have even her glyph right here with a hieroglyph, Chet Chor, Chet Chor, Chet Charir, Chet Charir. If you read it separately or together, often they have it as Hathor, Chet Chor, looking at the glyphs right there. But let's go over here for a moment, brothers and sisters, and let's look at the color, right? Now, this is from the heavenly cow, what is otherwise known as the heavenly cow. And this is the portion that is still visible. It's kind of marred, as one can see, right? But even the cow here was interesting. I think this is in Seti's, right? This is Seti's tomb right here. This is Seti's tomb, right? As we go to Seti's tomb, to put into context this particular, let's see if we can do this right here. All right, all right. Give thanks, give thanks. Okay, here, let's go through this. So we have the legend of the destruction of mankind. One of the best recommended texts is from Legend of the Gods by E.A. Wallace Budge. One thing we can say and should say that we like about Wallace Budge, in a lot of his research, he points to the Black African connection, inner Africa connection in many of his works. Unlike many other scholars that try to take Egypt, in a sense, out of Africa, or at least out of Black Africa, we like that Budge often, in reading over his books, even his Ethiopian documents and translation, he makes these connections. He sees there's a connection between ancient Mitzrayim, right, and also Ethiopia, Tobia, right, and also black people called today African people. So we recommend his particular compilation, and that's Legend of the Gods, Book 1. Now we're looking at the second of the ancient Kemetic Egyptian legends, and this is the legend of the destruction, what's called the destruction of mankind. So the text containing the legend of the destruction of mankind is written in hieroglyphs and is found on the four walls of a small chamber that is entered from the, quote, hall of columns in the tomb of Seti the First, that is situated on the west bank of the Nile at Wast, known nowadays as Thebes. Right, at Thebes, that's the Greek name. On the wall facing the door of this chamber is painted in red the figure of the large, quote, cow of heaven, the heifer. So here we have the heifer of heaven, the cow of heaven. The lower part of her belly is decorated with a series of 13 stars, and immediately beneath it are the two boats of Re, some say Ra, we will say Re or Roi, right? Called the Semketet and the Manchet, or the Sektet and the Matet. Each of her four legs is held in position by two gods, right? Or two Neteru, and the god, the Netershu, with outstretched, uplifted arms supporting her body. Now the cow was published by Champollion without the text, right? And the most important mythological text, this most important mythological text from ancient Kemet, was first published and translated by Professor E. Neville in 1874. Now there's some more on this. Hopefully we'll get to go through a little bit more of the detail. And then we also have another site here that we shared with some of the Chaverim. In mythology, destruction of mankind is a motif found in Egyptian mythology, Sumerian mythology, and Babylonian mythology. So once again, this idea of the destruction of humanity, the destruction of mankind, of humanity, is a motif that's found in Egyptian, right, Hecatopian or Mitzrayim mythology, Sumerian mythology, and Babylonian mythology, as well as in the Hebrew mythos as well, right? The Hebrew mythology, referring to the destruction of mankind, of humanity, via a great flood for either sins, uckeries, falling shorts, lacks, missing the mark, or blasphemies against the supreme, we could say God, the supreme Elohim. Now, Egyptian mythology from Kemet in 1350 BC. Now, just to put this in time consideration, we see the exodus of the children of Israel, the Hebrews, is taking place circa 1440 to 1400 BC. So here we find in 1350 BC in Egyptian mythology, Kemetic mythology, the so-called, right, destruction of mankind, right, is recounted in the first part of what's known as the Book of the Heavenly Cow, the Book of the Heavenly Para, right? And it tells the story of how the god, the Egyptian Neter, Re or Ra or Roi, how he sends a flood right? Destroy mankind, humanity, for rebelling against him or for, quote, blaspheming him, end quote, by saying that he had, quote, grown old in life, strength, and health. That has, which has a mountain, a bird, and the following, okay, here in the Budge translation here, 1904, Budge says that Re is the Neter, or the Egyptian, we say God, who created himself after he had risen in sovereignty over men and over the Neteru, or the gods, right, as well as over things, the one. So ascribing here to the, we say, the old God, because Re or Roi was the old God of Mitzrayim, right? Before the other gods, before the Isis and all of that story and everything. That's kind of a later story, right? We have Horus the elder, and then we have Horus the younger, and then we have the rise of Yisei, Osset, Yiset, essay, right? Her rising up. Now, I'm not going to get into Isis right now in this. We're going to focus on Hathor. But it seems as though Isis appropriates a lot of the attributes of other, we could say, gods or goddesses, right? And she becomes like, it's almost like what has happened between, say, Judaism, right, and Christianity. That's the only we can liken it to. Now, here we're just giving it a couple of basic, a basic overview here as we just try to put this into a context here with this Torah portion, right, as well as with the ancient prescription, right, and engraving, and seeing what is the correspondence between this and that. So the sages interpreted the Para Aduma being without blemish, Ain Baha Mum, Ain not Baha in Ha Mum, without having any blemish, any spot in her, to refer to the Para, the cow's color. That is, it was to be without a single white or black hair. So if it had a single white hair, that's the blemish there. It's not completely tamima, completely red. If it has a single white here, it's not tamima, completely red. It has a mum. It has a blemish in it. This is the only sacrifice in HaTorah where the color of the animal, as we would say, the color of the cross, but the color of the animal is explicitly required. Moreover, the cow, the para, right, the cow was never to have had a yoke upon it, a yoke upon her, meaning that it or she must never have been used for any profane purposes, any purpose outside, we could say outside of the sanctuary or regular purpose. So it couldn't be a cow or that you have used like in farming or something else, and then you say, okay, we're gonna then offer this as the paraduma. No. So unlike the other sacrifices offered at the Mizbeach, the altar, in the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the paraduma was taken outside the camp. Now this now reminds us of the Brit Chadasha concerning Robenu Yeshua HaNotzri, right, Justice of Nazareth, where he was crucified according to the Brit Chadasha outside of the camp. So this is where we make the link with the color of the para, the color of the heifer, of the cow, and also that great movie and film, right, by John Claude, Brother John Claude, right, called The Color of the Cross, right? So it had to be taken outside the camp to be slaughtered before HaKohen, before the priest, in the presence of the priest, who then took some of her blood and sprinkled it 7 times before or in the face of the Mishkan, right? And before the Mishkan. So we have the Patah, like we say Patah. Someone say Patah in ancient. Well, in Hebrew, the Patah is the door, opening the door of the tabernacle. Then the Paraduma would be burned in her entirety. That means her hide, her flesh, her blood, even her dung, right? Her doo-doo, her dung were to be burnt. Now this too is totally unlike every other Levitical sacrifice. So as we pay heed to the pattern and recognizing the pattern, we can also see that this is outside of the pattern. And also, unlike other offerings, the blood of the sacrifice was also to be completely burnt, right? Burnt in the fire, in the Aish, right? Burned in the fire. Now, what's particularly also interesting is the hyssop, right? The hyssop. We have some of the other elements, the hyssop. So what we're speaking about here is what's often referred to as the book of the heavenly cow. So we're comparing the book of the heavenly cow, what was prescribed there in Mitzrayim, with what we have here in Torah, here in the fourth book of Moshe, here at the sixth reading for this sabbatical study for Shabbat Chukat, Sabbath ordinance, the Sabbath ordinance of the Para Aduma. So we have the hyssop, right, scarlet yarn, and a cedar stick would then be thrown up upon the burning Para Aduma, red heifer, red Hathor, that were the same items. I want you to note this here. These were the same items, the very same items that was used to cleanse from tzara'at, or from what is called leprosy in the translation, or more better, skin disease, the tzara'at. So we have hyssop, scarlet yarn, and a cedar stick, right? These are the same items that are used to cleanse the mitzorah, the motzi ra'a, right? The mitzorah, the leper, the one skin disease, from leprosy or skin disease. These items, along with the blood of the Para Aduma, the red heifer, were therefore assimilated into the ashes of the sacrifice that were gathered and mixed with living water. So when the scripture refers to living water, what it's basically saying is running water. So water that's not running is stagnant water. Water that's not running is dead water. But water that is running is called living water. So this was to be mixed, right, assimilated, right? These items, the hyssop, the scarlet yarn, and the cedar stick, right, along with the blood of the Para Aduma, the red Hathor, right, were therefore assimilated into the ashes of the sacrifice, which were gathered and mixed with running water or living water to create what was called the water of separation. So in some places we find it as the water of separation. It's also called and maybe referred to as the water of lustration. Some might even say the water of purification, but the water of separation, the water of lustration for the Bnei Yisrael, for the Beit Yisrael, the Beta Israel community. Anyone who came into contact with death, meaning came into contact with a corpse, a dead body, was required to be cleansed with these waters. The purification procedure, the Seder, it took a full 7 days, using three stalks of hyssop that was dipped into the water and shaken over the defiled, or the tameh, the contaminated person, on the 3rd day, and then again on the 7th day. After the 2nd sprinkling, the person was immersed in a mikveh, a mikveh, right, and was declared tahor, teru, was declared clean the following evening. So this is what we have here before the Torah reading and feeding. Then after the first item concerning the Para Aduma, this 39th sabbatical study for this Shabbat strong, it then jumps ahead 38 years. Because we're covering here in Numbers, Bamidbar, the wilderness, the 40 years of wandering of that faithless, creditless, discrediting, right, discrediting, lack of admitting generation that Yahweh, Jehovah, brought out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, but was not pleased to bring them in because of their grumbling, mumbling, murmuring, and testing Yahweh the 10 times, and most of all slandering that Afro-Canaanite land. Right, so it jumps ahead 38 years, right, when the Amo Yisrael arrived in the wilderness of Sin. Right, we get the death of Moshe's sister Miriam, right, on the 10th of Abib. She died and was buried. After her death, what happened? Ha'am, Jah people, they thirsted for water. And again, they complained. Yahweh, he then instructed Moshe to take his staff as a sign of authority and to speak to the rock to yield its water. Moses was very angry. He was angry at the rebellious, at the bitter Israelites. The word for bitter and rebel is interesting in the Hebrew. You know, both means the same thing. So to become embittered with somebody, also Hebraically is a hint, becoming rebellious. So the rebellious Israelites, however. And instead, he struck the stone. He let the anger, remember previous in the 1 or 2 Torah portions previous, where Moshe, where he gets up to advocate and defend for the Israelites, calling on selected attributes of the 13 attributes of Yahweh. And when Jehovah says to him, Moses, I'll forgive them, I'll pardon them based on your word. We look into that and see that this is what Jah was saying. He said to Moses, stand back, let me destroy these rebellious people that have tested me these 10 times and are slandering the Afro-Canaanite land, Afro-Canaanite land. Let me destroy them. Moses steps forward to defend them. And even when Moses stepped forward, he says something very interesting. He says, what were the Egyptians, the Mitzrayim, think about all this? They're going to think that it's because you was not able to bring the people into the land. That's why you destroyed them in the Midbar. And then he calls on selected attributes, his 13 attributes revealed in Exodus chapter 34. Moses, as a good attorney, a good advocate, right, a good legal counsel, he knew which of the 13 to call on to get the ultimate mercy for the rebellious Israelites. But now, 38 years later, right, the people complain after Miriam dies, and also the Miriam and the Hathor connection needs to be also made. Moshe, he becomes angry at the rebellious Israelites, and instead of speaking to the rock, he spoke to the people. He chided, right, and berated the people. I mean, they deserved that perhaps, but what Moshe did that was wrong. Moshe, where Aharon, is that they disobeyed directly what they was told to do. They, after, can you imagine, after 30-something years, they might be thinking now, maybe we should have let Jehovah destroy the people, Moses, and make a great nation out of you. Then we will have this Ethiopian Hebrew nation, you know, already, right? But instead of them, and Moses in particular, speaking to the rock, he spoke to the people. Now think about that for a moment. To talk to the rock, that would seem silly to some people, right? But Moses said, he's going to talk to the people. Must we do everything for you? Have we do everything? You know, remember, this is like 38 years later after all of that rah-rah. Now the water issued forth after Moses struck the stone. But Elohim told Moshe that neither he nor Aharon would be permitted to enter into the promised land because now of their disobedience. Now here's what's very interesting, that even though Moshe, right, and Aharon, right, besought many times on behalf of the disobedient Israelites in the wilderness, that faithless generation that came out of Kemet, that came out of Mitzrayim. Notice that faithless generation that came out of Kemet, right? At every drop of this proverbial hat, they wanted to return to Kemet, to Egypt, right? And now, after all of this right here, Moses and Aharon, they now are caught in their lack, in their uckery, in their disobedience. My question to y'all is this. Moses and Aaron, we counted about 3-4 different times, they fall on their face and they pray and they say, have mercy on this people, so and so. Who prayed for them? Who prayed for them? Who asks Jehovah, have mercy on them? It's because of us. You know how disobedient we always be complaining, Jehovah. Let them see, let them enter into the land. Nobody prayed for them. It's just one of those, they say no good deed goes unpunished, right? Well, nobody prayed for them. And it's here in this Torah reading and feeding that we find out that Moshe and Aharon are not going to enter into the land. But more on the para aduma, right? The red heifer, as we can see right here, right? That which was engraved, right? That which was engraved, right? The para aduma, right? That which was engraved, right? Hathor rising, right? Hathor and Cheru, right? Did you know that in the oldest form of ancient Kemetic Mitzrayim spirituality, mythology, and everything, that Horus, the elder, was actually not originally the son of Isis, but was actually the son of Hathor. And some say that the spouse of Hathor, right, was Tahuti. It's kind of interesting. So what we're pointing to is that there is, in ancient Egypt, there is the original, we could say, mythology, and then there is like a latter-day mythology. In other words, it's almost like there's like the Old Testament Egypt, and there's like a New Testament Egypt, where Hathor, you know, and all the old gods get a second place. In fact, we mentioned that how Osset, Isis, she appropriates, or at least the priests. Remember, it's the priests that are doing a lot. The priests began to rewrite a lot of the mythology. This is why it's important for us to go to the original, to the oldest prescription. When we see the oldest prescription, we can understand what Moses was learned in, right? And also get some hints on this enigmatic, what's up with the para aduma? Do you think that the Egyptians, not the Egyptians, but that the Israelites who acting like Egyptians, every drop of the hat, they want to return to Egypt and everything, talking about how wonderful it was. Okay, do you think that when they got wind of this para aduma, right, the red heifer, they saw it as the red Hathor? Do you think that the sense was lost on them? What is going on here with this very cryptic, right, this very cryptic sacrifice? This sacrifice that in a sense goes outside of the pattern. And then also in this 39th sabbatical study, we have the death of Miriam. Now Miriam, we have to recognize that in ancient Egypt, right, in other words, it's almost like they had two, how can I say, they had in ancient Egypt, what they were doing in ancient Egypt, they wanted to do in the wilderness, but Jah here is seeking to cut them off from their old used to behavior, like the old fire stick, like the dog wallowing, the dog returning to the vomit, and the pig wallowing in the mud. Something new is being introduced here. But something new is being introduced here, not just out of the blue, but in context with symbology, right? We say allegory, symbology, parabological links that definitely points them to where they came from. But the direction instruction here seems to be going 180-degree opposite, as though to wean them off of what they are so powerfully addicted to because of their 400+ year familiarity, and no doubt because of their participation in many of the ancient rites and rituals, right? So right here, this is an interesting book here. I want to get a copy of this. I was reading a little bit of that. But anyway, brothers and sisters, a little bit more on the para aduma, right? The red Hathor, right? The red heifer, right? And just note that Miriam, right? The passing of Miriam also is in this very same Torah portion, that we have the red heifer, right? The para aduma, the red Hathor. Is there any connection with Miriam in ancient Egypt? Note that we get to know what Miriam's name, her Hebrew name is, but did she also have an Egyptian name? when she's first introducing the narrative in Exodus, it just says that the boy's sister, even mentions the boy's mother. Later on, we get their Hebrew names, but we should not doubt that while they was in Mitzrayim, while they was in Kemet, that they had Kemetic names, and that they also were involved more or less or affected by the religion, culture, society that they was in. We get to see this throughout the Torah study right here. Anyway, Shalom Chabarim, going to pick up on this a little bit more and go another level deeper in the Para Aduma, the red Hathor, the red heifer, right? And this Torah reading and feeding right here for the 39th sabbatical study for this Rastafari Shabbat Strong, Shabbat Chukat. So check out the lojs.org for the summary for this Torah reading and feeding. Also the evening podcast on Rastafari Israelites on the YouTube, as well as Rastafari Yehudi, Rastafari Jews right here. Also check out Rastafari TV as well, both on the YouTube and also on our own platform. Hail up. Yes, Shalom Chabarim, Shalom Lehitarot. This is Rasiadonis. This is Yadon ben Chayim, Rasiadonis Tafari. And I approve of this sabbatical study, this message. Shalom Chabarim, Shalom.